There's 47 of us, ma'am. We got nowhere to go. Lily Thompson looked past him, past his soaking leather jacket, past the death's head patch on his chest, and she saw 46 more men standing in the rain. Her hands were shaking. She had $17 in her purse, half a box of spaghetti, and a roof that leaked in 4 places. Every reasonable instinct she had said close the door. Lock it. Turn off the lights. She opened it wider. Get in, she said. That one decision made in 3 seconds in a storm by a 75-year-old widow with almost nothing changed everything. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The storm had been building all afternoon. Lily Thompson could feel it in her knees before she ever saw the clouds rolling in from the west. 62 years of living in the Arizona desert had taught her body to read the sky the way other people read a newspaper, the pressure dropping, the air going still and electric, the dry heat suddenly replaced by something angry and close. She stood at her kitchen window watching the horizon turn the color of a bruise, and she told herself it was nothing, just a summer storm. She'd seen 1,000 of them, but her knees said otherwise. She turned back to the pot on the stove. Tomato sauce, the canned kind, bubbling slow and low. She had half a box of spaghetti left, maybe a heel of bread in the drawer, and $14 and some change in the ceramic rooster on the counter that her late husband Gerald had won at a county fair 31 years ago. She'd kept the rooster long after she'd stopped keeping much else. It made her feel less alone in the kitchen. The motorcycle sound started as a low hum. She thought it was thunder at first. Then it got louder and louder, and it didn't stop. Lily set down her wooden spoon and walked to the front window. Through the cracked glass cracked since the summer before last when a baseball from the Henderson boy 3 houses down had caught it just wrong. She saw them coming down Route 89 like a slow-moving storm of their own. Motorcycles, dozens of them. The kind of motorcycles that you didn't just hear, you felt in your chest. Big, heavy machines with chrome that caught even the flat pre-storm light and threw it back hard. She knew what they were before she saw the patches on their jackets. Everyone in Williams, Arizona knew what those patches meant. She stepped back from the window. Her heart was doing something she didn't entirely appreciate, something fast and fluttery that her doctor had told her to avoid. She pressed her hand flat against her chest and breathed through her nose the way she'd been taught. In, out, in, out. The motorcycles slowed. They pulled off the highway one by one and came to a stop right there in front of her house. Right there on the gravel patch that used to be a lawn before Gerald died and she stopped watering things. She counted. She couldn't help it. 34, 39, 43, 47, 47 motorcycles. 47 men in leather jackets with the Hells Angels' death's head on their backs sitting in her front yard in the gathering dark as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone knocked on her door. Lily stood in her kitchen and didn't move for a full 10 seconds. The knock came again, not aggressive, not pounding, just a knock. The kind of knock a person makes when they're not sure they're welcome. She noticed that. She noticed it the way she noticed everything. The way a woman living alone for a decade learns to notice things because noticing things is what keeps you safe. She walked to the door. She didn't know why. She would think about that later, lying awake, listening to the rain, trying to understand the exact mechanics of the decision she made. But in the moment, she simply walked to the door and she opened it. The man standing on her porch was enormous. 6'3" at least, shoulders like a door frame, arms that looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts of something larger. His beard was soaked, plastered to his jaw in dark ropes. His jacket was black leather, and across the chest above the Hells Angels patch was a name tag that said Vincent in capital letters pressed into the leather like a brand. He was holding his helmet in both hands like an offering. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm real sorry to bother you." Lily looked at him. She looked past him at the 46 other men standing in her yard, rain coming down harder now, soaking through leather and denim and the kind of clothes that weren't designed to be rained on. "The storm knocked out the bridge on 89, Vincent said. "The one over Sycamore Creek. The water came up fast. We can't get through, and we can't go back the way we came because the road's flooding from the south. We're stuck." He paused. He looked almost ashamed of this enormous man with arms like bridge cables. "We don't have anywhere to go," he said. "I saw your light on." Lily said, "How many of you are there?" 47, ma'am. She was quiet for a moment. The rain hit the porch roof above her, and the sound of it was steady and hard, the kind of rain that meant business. You better come in, she said. Vincent blinked, just once, as if he hadn't been sure he'd heard her correctly. Ma'am, we can stay on the porch. We don't need to. You'll catch pneumonia on the porch, Lily said. Come in. She stepped back and held the door open, and for a moment Vincent just stood there in the rain, looking at this 75-year-old woman with her white hair and her house coat, and her hand steady on the door, and something moved across his face that she couldn't quite name. Yes, ma'am, he said. Thank you. They came in, 47 Hells Angels soaking wet, smelling of rain and oil and road dust, filing through the front door of Lily Thompson's little house on the edge of Williams, Arizona. Some of them ducked their heads to fit under the doorframe. Some of them stopped in the entrance and looked around at the living room. The worn floral couch, the family photographs on the wall, the shelf with the ceramic figurines Gerald had given her for their anniversaries, and they got quiet in the particular way that men get quiet when they find themselves somewhere they didn't expect to be treated like people. They spread through the living room and into the hallway, and some of them sat on the floor because there weren't enough chairs, and they were careful about it, careful the way you are when you know you're a guest somewhere. A young one couldn't have been more than 25, sat down near the bookshelf and looked at the titles. You like Westerns? He asked, looking up at her. My husband did, Lily said. I kept them. Oh, he nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. He had a good life. She went back to the kitchen. She stood at the stove and looked at the pot of sauce, half a box of spaghetti, maybe a heel of bread, $14 in the ceramic rooster, 47 people. She did the math. The math did not work. She started cooking anyway. She filled the big pot with water, the one Gerald had used for canning, the biggest pot she owned, and set it on the back burner. She opened every cabinet she had, 2 more cans of tomato paste, a can of diced tomatoes, an onion, some dried oregano and garlic powder, and a jar of beef bouillon cubes that was probably 2 years past its date, but she was not going to mention that. She browned everything together. She stretched the sauce as far as it would go, adding water, adding spices, tasting, and adjusting the way her mother had taught her, the way you cook when you don't have enough, and you have to make something out of almost nothing. She cooked 2 full pots of pasta. She toasted the bread in the oven and sliced it thin. She set it all out on the kitchen table and the counter and said from the doorway, There's food if anybody's hungry. There was a silence. Then Vincent said from across the room, You don't have to do that, ma'am. I know I don't have to, Lily said. Come eat. What happened in that kitchen over the next 40 minutes was something Lily would never be able to fully describe to anyone, not her daughter Carol, not her neighbor Jean, not the reporter who showed up 6 weeks later wanting a quote. There was something about the sight of these men, these large, leather-jacketed, hard-faced men, hunched over plates of spaghetti in her small kitchen, eating carefully, saying please and thank you that cracked something open in the room. The fear that had been sitting in the air when they first came through the door dissolved slowly like sugar in warm water until it was just gone. A man named Russell Young, maybe 30, with tattoos up both sides of his neck, asked if he could wash the dishes. Lily told him where the soap was. A man named Doug, who had a gray beard down to his chest and hands the size of dinner plates, asked if she had a mop because someone had tracked mud in by the back door. She told him where the mop was. 2 men she never got the names of fixed the leg on the kitchen chair that had been wobbling since February without her asking or even mentioning it. She came back from the bathroom and the chair was just fixed solid on the floor, and those 2 men were back against the wall, quiet as furniture. Vincent found her in the hallway. Can I ask you something? He said. She looked up at him. Go ahead. Why did you let us in? She thought about it. She genuinely thought about it, standing there in her narrow hallway with the water-stained ceiling above them and the photographs of Gerald and Carol and the grandkids on the wall beside them. You knocked, she said finally. You knocked politely and you said please and you looked like you needed help. Vincent was quiet. My husband always said, Lily continued, that the only way to know what somebody's made of is to watch what they do when they need something and they know you could say no. She looked at him. You were polite, so. Vincent nodded. Something shifted in his jaw, tightened, and then released. Most people, he said, just see the jacket. I see the jacket, Lily said. I just also see the man wearing it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Thank you, ma'am. I mean that. You're welcome, she said. There's more spaghetti if you want it. The storm hit its peak around 9 o'clock. The rain was coming down in sheets, the thunder rolling so close it rattled the windows. The cracked one in the living room shivered in its frame every time the thunder came, and Lily watched it with the private dread of someone who'd been watching a thing hold together through too many storms for too many years. The men settled in for the night. Some of them found spaces on the floor, rolled up their jackets for pillows. Some sat against the walls and talked low. A few of them actually fell asleep sitting up, which struck Lily as a kind of superpower she had never possessed and privately envied. Russell appeared at the kitchen door around 10. Can't sleep, he said. You mind if I sit in here? Suit yourself, Lily said. She was at the table with a cup of tea and she pushed the chair out across from her with her foot in a wordless invitation. He sat. For a while, neither of them said anything. The rain hit the window above the sink. The refrigerator hummed. How long you been out here alone? Russell asked. 10 years, Lily said. That's a long time. Some days longer than others. He looked at his hands. He had a ring on his right hand, thick silver, something engraved on it she couldn't quite read. I lost my dad 2 years ago, he said. He was alone at the end, too. I keep thinking. He stopped, started again. I keep thinking about whether he was scared. At the end, whether there was anybody there. Lily was quiet for a moment. Was there... Yeah, Russell's voice was rough. We made it in time, but just... Then he wasn't alone, Lily said. That's what matters. Russell looked at her. His eyes were red at the edges and he blinked hard once. You remind me of him, he said. The way you just opened the door. He was like that. Never turned anybody away. It gets you in trouble sometimes, Lily said. Yeah, Russell said. He almost smiled. Yeah, it does. And they sat there until nearly midnight, talking about nothing and everything about Gerald, about Russell's father, about the road, and what it felt like to be on it, about how Williams had changed since the highway got rerouted and took the tourists with it, about the Henderson boy and his baseball and the cracked window that had never gotten fixed. She told him about the leak in the roof over the back bedroom, the one she'd put a bucket under so long the bucket had become furniture. He listened the way her son used to listen, leaned forward. Elbows on the table, actually listening rather than waiting for his turn to talk. The whole roof, he said. The whole back section, she said. I got a quote 2 years ago. Man said $1,800. Russell was quiet. I've got a system, Lily said. I empty the bucket every time it rains. That's not a system, Russell said. That's survival. Well, she said. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Sometimes survival is enough. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him thinking, could see something assembling itself behind his eyes, but she didn't know what it was, and she didn't ask. She had learned not to chase other people's thoughts. Vincent came to find her just before 2 in the morning. The storm had eased to a steady drizzle, the worst of it passed. He stood in the kitchen doorway, and his expression was different than it had been earlier. Not soft exactly, but open the way a face gets when the guard has come down. We're going to start heading out at first light, he said. When the road clears. Lily nodded. I want you to know, Vincent said, what you did tonight. I made spaghetti, Lily said. You made more than spaghetti. She looked at him. You looked at 47 men that half the country crosses the street to a porto. He said, and you opened your door and set plates on the table and asked if anyone wanted more bread. He paused. You have no idea how rare that is. Lily set down her mug. She looked at this enormous man with his waterlogged beard and his death's head jacket and his careful, serious eyes, and she felt something catch in her throat. Everybody needs to eat, she said. Everybody needs a dry place when it rains. Yes, ma'am, Vincent said. They do. He held out his hand and she shook it, her small, thin-fingered hand inside his enormous one, and he shook it with the kind of careful firmness that meant he was trying very hard not to show how much the moment meant to him. We'll be out of your way by 6, he said. No rush, she said. There's instant coffee in the cabinet. Help yourselves. He almost smiled. The almost smile changed his whole face, made him look younger and less like the thing people were afraid of, more like the thing he actually was. Thank you, he said, for everything. Get some sleep, Lily said. You look like you need it. He laughed, just once low and surprised as if he'd forgotten how. And then he went. Lily sat alone in the kitchen for a while after he left. She listened to the rain coming down soft now, almost gentle. The thunder moved east and taking its anger with it. She listened to the low voices of men sleeping in her living room, in her hallway, the occasional shift and settle of bodies on her worn floors. Her house, which was usually so quiet it sometimes felt like it was holding its breath, was full of the sound of people. She sat with that for a long time. Then she got up, rinsed her mug, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. She would not be prepared for what came with the morning. She would not be prepared at all. Lily woke up at 5:43 in the morning the way she always did, not from an alarm, not from any sound in particular, but from the particular quality of light that came through her bedroom curtains just before dawn, pale and uncertain, like the day hadn't made up its mind yet. She lay there for a moment with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and then she remembered. She remembered all of them. She got up slowly, the way her body required her to get up these days, one joint at a time, and put on her housecoat and her slippers and walked out into the hallway. The house was already half empty. She could feel it before she saw it, the way a house feels different when the number of people in it has changed. 3 men were still asleep on the living room floor, jackets over their faces. 2 more sat on the porch steps, coffee cups in hand, talking low in the gray morning air. The rest of them were gone. She walked to the kitchen and found it clean. Not just rinsed, not just wiped, actually thoroughly, meticulously clean. The dishes were washed and stacked. The counters had been wiped down. Someone had swept the floor. The pot she'd used for the pasta was drying upside down on the dish rack, and next to it someone had left a folded piece of paper. She picked it up. It was a $100 bill. And underneath the 100 in handwriting that was careful and deliberate, like a man who didn't write often, but wanted to get it right for the food and the dry floor. Lily stood there in her clean kitchen in the gray morning light, holding that note and that $100 bill. And she pressed her lips together hard and told herself absolutely not. She was not going to cry over $100 and a piece of notebook paper. She cried anyway, just for a minute, just standing there alone. Then she folded the note carefully and put it in the pocket of her housecoat, set the 100 on top of the ceramic rooster, and put the kettle on. Vincent appeared in the kitchen doorway while the water was heating. He was dressed and alert, all 6'3" of him, and he was holding his helmet again the same way he'd been holding it the night before on her porch, like he needed something to do with his hands. We're heading out, he said. I heard you moving around, Lily said. There's instant coffee. I told you last night. I know, I had some. It was, he paused. It was fine. It was terrible, Lily said. Gerald always said I bought the wrong kind. I just never got around to changing. Something moved across Vincent's face. How long has he been gone? 10 years in November, he nodded. He stood there in the doorway and didn't leave, and she had the sense that he was working up to something, the way a person braces themselves before saying a thing they need to say. We looked around a little this morning, he said. Before it got light, I hope you don't mind. Lily turned from the kettle. Looked around at what? The house. His voice was careful. The roof over the back bedroom, the foundation on the east side, there's a crack running up from the ground that's got water damage behind it. The porch railing is rotted through in 2 places. The electrical panel in the utility room is, ma'am, that panel is old enough to be a fire hazard. Lily set her mug down. I know about the panel, she said. I've known about it for a while. You live alone, he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact stated plainly, and somehow that plainness made it worse than either. I manage, she said. Yes, ma'am, I can see that you do. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'd like to come back and fix it. She looked at him. I've got guys, he said. Real guys. Russell does electrical. He's licensed. I know 2 carpenters and a roofer who owes me a favor since 2019. I could have a crew out here inside a week. Lily opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can't afford. I'm not talking about money, Vincent said. The kettle started to whistle and she turned around to deal with it because she needed a moment to deal with it. She needed a moment to get her face in order to put everything she was feeling somewhere that wasn't visible. "You don't owe me anything," she said her back to him. "No," Vincent said. "I don't, but I want to anyway." She poured her water. She stirred her terrible instant coffee. She stood there with her back to him for a few seconds longer than was strictly necessary. Then she turned around. "Let me think about it," she said. He nodded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. Not a business card, just a white card with a phone number handwritten on it in the same deliberate writing as the note. He set it on the counter next to the ceramic rooster. "You call me," he said, "whenever you're ready. No pressure, no timeline." "You mean that every word?" She picked up the card. She looked at it. Just a name, Vincent, and a number. No last name, no title, no explanation of who he was or what he was offering or why. She looked up at him. "Why?" she said, not suspiciously, genuinely. He looked at her for a long moment. "Because my mother died alone," he said. "In a house with a leaky roof and a panel the fire department later said should have been replaced in 1998. And none of us knew because she didn't want to be a burden." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I don't want that to happen to somebody else." The kitchen was very quiet. "I'm sorry," Lily said. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." He picked up his helmet. "You take care of yourself, Mrs. Thompson." "Lily," she said. He almost smiled again. That same almost smile that changed his whole face. "Lily," he said. He said it like it meant something. Then he walked out. She heard him cross the living room, heard him say something low to the men who were still there, heard the shuffle and stir of them getting up. She heard her front door open and close, and then there was the deep rolling thunder of 47 motorcycle engines turning over one after another, and she stood in her kitchen with both hands wrapped around her terrible coffee, and she listened to them go. The sound faded. The road went quiet. Her house went back to its usual silence. She put the card from Vincent in the drawer, where she kept the important things, the insurance papers, the copy of Gerald's will, the photograph of her and Carol from Carol's college graduation that Carol didn't know she still had. She put it in there and she closed the drawer, and she told herself she probably wouldn't call. She was wrong about that, but she didn't know it yet. What happened next didn't come from Lily at all. It came from Russell. Russell had taken 3 photographs on his phone the morning before they left, not of Lily, not of the living room or the kitchen or anything personal. Just the house, the east wall with the foundation crack, the back roof section with the missing shingles you could see from the yard, the porch railing, the rotted section sagging under its own weight. He had taken them quietly before the sun was fully up, and he had sent them to Vincent without a word. Vincent had looked at those photographs for a long time. Then he had made some calls. Lily knew none of this. Lily spent the next 4 days the way she spent most days, slowly, carefully alone. She watered her garden. She went to the Safeway 3 miles down the road and bought groceries, and she used $40 of the 100 Vincent had left, which felt like an enormous extravagance. And she bought chicken and real coffee and a good onion, and she did not feel guilty about it, not even a little. She repaired a section of fencing in the backyard that the storm had knocked down. She emptied the bucket in the back bedroom, which had collected a good 3 inches during the storm. She called her daughter Carol on Tuesday and did not mention any of it, the bikers, the $100, the note, the card in the drawer, because she knew exactly what Carol would say, and she didn't have the energy for that conversation. "How are you doing, Mom?" "Fine, sweetheart. Just fine." "You sound tired." "I'm always tired. I'm 75. "Mom, tell me about the grandkids." Carol told her about the grandkids. Lily listened. She asked the right questions. She made the right sounds. And she hung up the phone and sat very still for a moment, because the truth was she wasn't fine. She was something else, something she didn't have a clean word for. Unsettled, turned around like a compass that had been near a magnet and was still finding north again. She kept thinking about what Vincent had said about his mother. She kept thinking about the bucket in the back bedroom. On Thursday evening, she went to the drawer and she got the card out, and she stood in the kitchen for a very long time. She turned the card over in her fingers. She set it on the counter. She picked it up again. She went to the phone. She stood there. She put it down and went to bed. On Friday morning, she called. It rang twice, 3 times. She was composing herself to leave a message, the words assembling themselves in her head when he picked up. Vincent. It's Lily Thompson, she said, from Williams. There was a half-second of silence. Then, yes, ma'am, I know who it is. I've been thinking about what you said. I figured you might call, he said. I'm glad you did. I want to be clear, Lily said. I'm not asking for charity. I've never asked for charity in my life, and I'm not starting now. I know that. I'll cook, she said. Whatever day you come, as many people as you bring, I'll feed everyone. Lily, Vincent said, and his voice was very gentle. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. It was almost word for word what she'd said to him in her kitchen 4 nights ago, and she thought maybe he heard that because he went quiet. It's what I have to offer. I'm a good cook. I have a good kitchen, and if your people are going to work on my house, the least I can do is feed them a decent meal. There was a pause on the line. Yes, ma'am, Vincent said. Deal. How many should I expect? I'll bring a crew, he said. Maybe 8, 10 guys. I'll plan for 12, she said, in case. He laughed. It was a real laugh this time, not the surprise single note from 4 nights ago, but a real one, and it was a good sound. How's Sunday, he said. This Sunday. Sunday's fine, she said. We'll be there at 8. I'll have coffee on, she said. Real coffee this time. I appreciate that, he said. The instant was terrible, Lily said. I know, I bought better. She hung up the phone and stood in her kitchen with her hands flat on the counter, and she breathed. She felt the way you feel after you've made a decision you have been circling for days, lighter, but also slightly terrified, the way anything real feels right before it starts. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't call Carol. She didn't tell her neighbor John, who would have had 17 opinions and 2 warnings in a story about someone her cousin knew who had done something similar and regretted it. She just started planning her menu. Pot roast, she decided, big enough to feed 12. Cornbread, green beans from the garden, an apple pie if she had time, and she would make time. Sunday came. At 7:55, she heard them on the highway. Not as many as before, no earth-shaking rumble of 47 engines. Just a small cluster of motorcycles turning onto her road. She counted. 8 bikes. 9. Then a pickup truck, an older one, riding heavy in the back from the weight of what was in it. She stood on her porch with her coffee, and she watched them come. Russell was the first one off his bike. He walked up to her porch, and he was grinning warm and genuine, and he was carrying a large paper bag that smelled like donuts. Morning, he said. I figured you'd already have breakfast handled, but he held up the bag. Donuts are not breakfast, Lily said. Oh, no, ma'am. They're dessert. Yes, ma'am. Put them in the kitchen. He grinned harder and went inside, and behind him came the rest of them. And behind the rest of them came Vincent. And behind Vincent came something Lily had not expected. Something that stopped her cold on her own porch with her coffee halfway to her mouth. A woman, mid-40s maybe, short dark hair, work boots, a tool belt already strapped around her waist. She walked with the kind of confidence that said she'd been carrying a tool belt since before some of the men present were born, and she looked up at Lily's porch roof the moment she got out of the truck, just automatically, the way a doctor looks at your face before you've even told them what's wrong. Mrs. Thompson, she held out her hand. Her grip was firm and dry. I'm Patricia. Everyone calls me Pat. I'm the roofer Vincent mentioned. He said you owed him a favor, Lily said. Pat laughed. He said that, huh? She glanced back at Vincent, who was currently pretending not to hear them. Yeah, that's fair. She looked back up at the roofline. You want to tell me about the back section, or should I just go look? Go look, Lily said, and I'll tell you over breakfast. What followed was something Lily had no category for. These men and Pat worked with a focus and efficiency that reminded her of nothing so much as the ER, the one time she'd had to go. Everyone knowing their role, no wasted motion, no asking what needed to be done next. Russell had the electrical panel open within 20 minutes. A man named Doug, the one with the gray beard from the night of the storm, was on his back under the east side of the house, looking at the foundation before the coffee had finished brewing. Two younger men had the porch railing off and the rotted sections piled in the yard before she'd even finished setting the breakfast table. She fed them. She fed them eggs and bacon and biscuits she'd made from scratch, and they ate the way people eat when they've been working since before sunrise with gratitude and real hunger. Elbows on the table, complimenting everything, asking for seconds and thirds, and she kept the coffee coming, and she listened to them talk. This was how she learned things, not by asking, but by listening. She learned that Russell had been doing electrical work for 12 years, that he'd gotten his license after he'd come back from overseas and needed something to keep his hands busy. She learned that Doug had a daughter in Flagstaff he'd been trying to reconcile with for 3 years, and that it was finally slowly starting to work. She learned that Pat had built her own house at 32, and that Vincent had helped her pour the foundation in the middle of a February that she said was the coldest she'd ever felt in her life. She learned without anyone telling her directly that these people had a history together that went deeper than just the patches on their jackets. They had funerals they'd attended together, and hospital waiting rooms they'd sat in together, and roads they'd ridden together through the dark, and that kind of shared history made people something that was harder to name than family but wasn't really different from it. At 11:45, Pat came in from outside and sat down at the kitchen table with the expression of a person about to deliver news they have complicated feelings about. "Okay," she said, "I need to tell you something." Lily sat down across from her. "The back section is worse than it looks," Pat said. "I mean, the roofing part, I can fix that. New shingles, reseal the flashing, probably a day's work. But underneath," she paused, "there's rot in the decking, the wood underneath the shingles. It's been wet for a while and it's spread further than what you can see from the outside." Lily was quiet. "How much of the deck?" she said. "More than half the back half of the house," Pat said. "If I fix just the shingles and leave the deck, it's going to fail again within 2 years. Sooner if you get another storm like the one last week." "How much to fix it right?" Pat told her. The number was not violent. It was worse than violent. It was the kind of number that makes a 75-year-old woman on a fixed income sit very still and feel the floor shift slightly beneath her. Lily sat with it. She sat with it for a full minute, maybe longer. "I don't have that," she said quietly. "I know," Pat said. "I can't ask." "Nobody's asking you to ask," Pat said. "Yes." Her voice was level and direct and kind, all three things at once, which was a difficult combination, and Pat pulled it off without effort. "But I need you to know what's there, because you deserve to know what's there." The kitchen was very still. From outside came the sounds of work, the nail gun on the porch. Russell's voice calling something to Doug about a breaker, the creak and shift of the house being attended to. The house that Lily had watched slowly come apart for 10 years, year by year, one thing at a time, the way everything comes apart when there's nobody to help hold it together. She pressed her hand flat on the kitchen table. She looked at Pat. "What would you do," she said, "if it were your house?" Pat looked back at her without flinching. "I'd fix it right," she said. "I'd fix it right and I'd figure out the rest later." Lily nodded slowly. She nodded the way you nod when you've made a decision that scares you and you're committing to it before you can change your mind. "Fix it right," she said. Pat nodded back. Neither of them said anything about the money. Neither of them said anything about how. There was something unspoken moving through the room, something Lily couldn't name, but she felt it the way she'd felt the storm coming in her knees and her chest in the particular quality of the silence. She didn't know yet what that silence was building toward. She would find out, and when she did, it would crack her open. She just didn't know it yet. Pat left that Sunday evening without a number on paper, without a contract, without anything official changing hands, except a handshake and a look between two women who both understood what had just been agreed to. She climbed into the pickup truck tool belt, already off, and she rolled down the window and looked at Lily standing on the repaired porch. The railing solid now. No more give, no more sag, and she said, "I'll call Vincent tonight." That was all. Just that. And then she drove away. Lily stood on the new railing and pressed her palm against the wood and felt how solid it was, how completely, stubbornly solid. She hadn't realized until that moment how much of her body she'd been holding carefully moving around the house with a low-level, constant awareness of what not to lean on, what not to trust. She pressed both hands against the railing now and pushed testing it, and it didn't move at all. It just held. She went inside and she sat down in Gerald's chair, the one she never sat in, and she let herself feel the full weight of the day. She was in trouble, she knew that. Not the dramatic kind of trouble, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet kind, the kind that's been true for years and just got named out loud. The roof was worse than she'd admitted to herself. The electrical panel was worse than she'd admitted to herself. The crack in the east foundation to Doug had come to find her before he left and told her carefully, his giant hands turning his helmet around and around as he spoke, that the water behind it had been there long enough to compromise the framing. He said it gently. He said it the way you say something to someone when you need them to hear it, but you also need them to stay standing. She had thanked him. She had smiled. She had waited until his headlights swept away down the road before she stopped smiling. She sat in Gerald's chair, and she looked at the ceiling, and she said out loud to nobody, "Well, here we are." The ceiling didn't answer. It never did. She slept badly that night. Not from fear exactly. She'd had 10 years to make peace with the particular fear of being a woman alone in a house that was coming apart. What kept her awake was something more complicated. It was the feeling of hands. Russell's hands fixing the wobbling chair leg without being asked. Pat's firm, dry handshake. Doug lying under her house in the cold morning dirt because he wanted to know the truth of what was there. Vincent that first night holding his helmet like an offering. All those hands coming to her house, working on her house. She didn't know what to do with it. She'd spent 10 years not asking for help, getting very good at not needing it, and now she had people showing up and helping anyway, not because she'd asked, but because apparently she had given them something that night of the storm that they needed to give back. And she didn't know how to receive that. She genuinely didn't know the mechanics of it. She fell asleep somewhere around 2, and at 8 in the morning her phone rang. She picked it up, expecting Vincent. It was Carol. "Mom?" Lily's stomach dropped slightly. Carol's voice had a particular texture when something was wrong, and it had that texture now. "Good morning, sweetheart." "I got a call last night," Carol said, "from a man named Vincent." The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Lily sat very straight. "How did he get your number?" "He said Russell found it. He said you had an address book in the kitchen drawer, and Russell looked up my name." There was a pause. "He said he didn't think you'd tell me yourself." Lily pressed her lips together. She thought about Russell, that young man, with the ring on his right hand, who had sat across from her at this very table talking about his father. She thought about him opening her kitchen drawer, finding her address book, looking up Carol. She felt a flash of something that was either anger or embarrassment or both, and she sat with it for a second and then she let it go, because she just knew that he had done it because he thought it was the right thing. The same way she had opened her door to 47 strangers because she thought it was the right thing. "He told me about the roof," Carol said, "and the foundation, and the panel." Her voice was tight. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was handling it." "You were emptying a bucket." "Carol." Mom, I'm serious." And she was. Carol at 48 had her father's stubbornness and her mother's practicality, and when she combined them, she was formidable. "How long has the bucket been in the back bedroom?" Lily said nothing. "How long, Mom?" "A while," Lily said. "How long is a while?" "Since the summer before last." The silence on Carol's end was the particular silence of a person counting to 10. "I'm coming out," Carol said. "You don't need to do that." "I'm coming out this weekend." "Carol, it's a 6-hour drive." "I know how far it is, Mom. I've made that drive before." Her voice cracked just slightly, just at the edge. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" And here was the answer Lily had never said out loud, not to anyone. She sat in her kitchen with the phone against her ear, and she looked at the ceramic rooster, and she said, "Because you would have wanted to fix it, and I didn't want you to feel like you had to." The silence was different this time. Softer. "Mom," Carol said, and now she sounded like a daughter rather than a prosecutor, and that was worse actually because Lily could handle the prosecutor. "That's my job. That's literally my job. You're my mother." "You have your own life," Lily said. "Your own house, your own kids." "And you're their grandmother," Carol said. "And you matter. And you should have—" She stopped, started again. "I'm coming Friday," she said. "I'm staying the weekend." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Bring the grandkids," she said finally. "Both of them. Both of them. It's been too long." She heard Carol breathe out, long and slow, the way you breathe when the thing you've been afraid of has finally been said, and you're still standing. Okay, Carol said. Okay, both of them. A pause. Are these people, are they going to be okay to work on the house? They've already started, Lily said. And they're good people, Carol. They're Hell's Angels, Mom. I know what they are, Lily said. I'm also telling you what they are. Both things are true at the same time. Another silence. Friday, Carol said. I'll make pot roast, Lily said. She hung up the phone and sat with the quiet for a moment. She felt exposed the way you feel when someone has seen something you've been keeping covered. Not violated, just exposed. Like a wound that needs air, and you've been keeping bandaged. She thought about Russell looking up Carol's number. She thought about being angry about it and decided against it the same way she decided against a lot of things in 10 years of living alone, by asking herself whether the anger was going to help anything, and when the answer was no, setting it down. What she felt instead, sitting there in the morning quiet, was something closer to relief, a kind of exhausted, reluctant, long overdue relief. She poured her coffee, the good coffee, the kind she'd bought with the $40 from Vincent's 100, and she started making a grocery list for Friday. Vincent called at noon. I talked to some people, he said, no preamble, no warm-up, just that. I heard you talk to my daughter first, Lily said, a pause. I figured you might be upset about that. I'm not, she said, and she meant it. I understand why you did it. She deserved to know, Vincent said. Whatever else she deserved to know. I agree, Lily said. Now tell me who else you talked to. He told her. He'd made calls for 3 days. Quietly, methodically, the way she suspected Vincent did most things, without announcement, without drama, but with an absolute focus that didn't stop until the thing was done. He'd called members in Phoenix and Flagstaff and Tucson. He'd explained what needed to be done on the house. He'd asked who had skills. He'd asked who had materials. He'd asked who had time. Mom. The response had been, his word, overwhelming. How many people? Lily said. I don't have a final count, he said. Approximately. He paused. A lot more than 12. She held the phone and looked at the wall. Vincent, I know. This is too much. Lily, he said, and his voice was steady and certain. You fed 47 people with half a box of pasta, and you didn't say a word about what it cost you. You let strangers into your house in the middle of a storm without knowing a single thing about them, except that they knocked politely and said please. You live alone in a house that's been coming apart for years, and you never asked anybody for a thing. He stopped. This is not too much. This is barely enough. She was quiet. Let people help you, he said. Just this once. Let people help. She closed her eyes. She pressed the phone against her ear, and she heard behind his voice the distant sound of engines not close. Just the general highway sound, the world continuing its motion, all those people going all those places for all those reasons. Saturday, she finally said. Can you do Saturday? Saturday, he said. What do I need to do to prepare? Nothing, he said. Cook if you want to, other than that, nothing. How early will people start arriving? Sunrise, he said. I'll have coffee on at 5:30, she said. She heard the warmth in his silence. Yes, ma'am, he said. She spent the days between the call and Saturday in the particular focused calm that descended on her when she had decided to do something, and the only thing left was to do it. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, not for the bikers who didn't care, but because it was what you did when people were coming. It was how you respected them and yourself. She made a list of everything she knew was wrong with the house, and she gave it to Pat when Pat came by Thursday afternoon to measure the roof decking, and Pat read it without expression and folded it and put it in her pocket. Good list, Pat said. Gerald always said I was thorough, Lily said. He was right. Carol arrived Friday evening with both grandkids, Maya, 14, who had her grandmother's eyes and her grandfather's stubborn chin, and Sam, 11, who had recently decided that he was too old to hug people, and then immediately hugged Lily so hard she had to grab the doorframe. I missed you, he said, muffled into her shoulder. I missed you too, sweetheart, she said. More than you know. Carol stood in the doorway behind them, and she and Lily looked at each other over Sam's head, and a lot of things moved between them in that look that neither of them was ready to say out loud yet. Carol looked older, or maybe Lily just looked at her more carefully than usual. There were lines around Carol's eyes that hadn't been there the last visit, or maybe they had been, and Lily just hadn't let herself see them the same way Carol hadn't been letting herself see the bucket in the back bedroom. "Hi, Mom," Carol said. "Hi, baby," Lily said. Carol's jaw tightened, and her eyes went bright, and she looked up at the porch ceiling and blinked hard. "New railing," she said, running her hand along it. "Some people fixed it." "Some people," Carol said. "Come inside," Lily said. "The pot roast needs another 20 minutes." They ate dinner and the grandkids talked enough for everyone, which was exactly how Lily liked it. Maya had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about them. Sam ate 3 helpings and asked if there were Hell's Angels coming tomorrow, the way another child might have asked if there was going to be a birthday clown, with that same bright, uncomplicated excitement. And Carol gave him a look, and he said, "What? It's cool." And Lily laughed, really laughed, the kind she hadn't had cause for in a while. And even Carol smiled helplessly, the way mothers smile when they can't quite maintain the disapproval. After the kids were in bed, Carol and Lily sat at the kitchen table with wine. Carol had brought a bottle, a good one, and Lily didn't tell her she'd had to dig for the wine glasses because she hadn't used them since the previous Christmas. They sat and they were quiet for a while, the comfortable quiet of 2 people who have known each other long enough to not need to fill the silence. "I should have been coming more," Carol said. "You have a life," Lily said. "Stop saying that like it's a reason." Carol turned her wine glass around. "You're my mother. Coming to see you isn't a favor. It should just be what I do." She paused. "Dad would have—" "Your father," Lily said gently, "is not here. And I mean that in the kindest way possible. We don't get to make our decisions based on what someone who's gone would have thought." Carol looked up. "You make your decisions based on what you need to live with," Lily said. "That's all any of us can do." Carol was quiet for a long moment. "Are you okay?" she said. "Surely okay. Not the phone okay." Lily thought about it honestly. She thought about the bucket. She thought about the foundation crack, the electrical panel, the decade of managing alone, and the strange relief of finally having it seen. She thought about Vincent's card in the drawer, and Russell's face across the kitchen table, and Pat's handshake, and 47 motorcycles in her yard in the rain. "I am," she said. "I actually am." She meant it. She was surprised to mean it, but she did. Saturday arrived the way important days arrive, quietly without announcement, the sky still dark when Lily got up at 5, the coffee already gurgling, when Carol appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like she hadn't slept much either. "I heard engines," Carol said. "They said sunrise," Lily said. "Mom, it's 5:40. "Some people start early." Carol moved to the window above the sink. She looked out. She was still for a moment. "Mom," she said, slowly. "What?" There are motorcycles all the way down the road." Lily came to stand beside her. She looked out. She stopped breathing for a second. Not 8 bikes, not 12, not even the couple dozen she'd imagined when Vincent said a lot more than 12. The road in front of her house was lined with motorcycles as far back as she could see, in the gray pre-dawn light, parked in 2 neat columns along the shoulder, and they were still coming. The sound she'd heard as a low hum was becoming something larger, the way a river sounds, when you get close to it, not just sound, but presence, volume, a physical thing. Carol was gripping the edge of the sink. "How many did he say?" she said. "He said a lot," Lily said. "Mom, I can see probably 200 from here, and the road goes further." The knock on the door came at exactly 5:58. Vincent, he looked the same as he had the first night, enormous, careful, holding his helmet. Except this time he was smiling. A real, full, unguarded smile, and it transformed his face completely, turned him from something intimidating into something that was just plainly a man who was happy about something. "Good morning," he said. Lily looked past him, down the road, and for the second time in one morning, she stopped breathing because now she could see the full scope of it, now that the sky had lightened enough, and it was not 200 motorcycles. It was more than she could count. They stretched down the road and around the bend, and she could hear more still coming, the rumble building from the distance. Men and women in leather jackets standing beside their bikes, talking, waiting. Trucks pulled over on the shoulder, loaded with lumber and roofing materials and equipment whose purpose she couldn't immediately identify. A flatbed with a generator. A trailer with scaffolding. 3 pickup trucks with extended beds full of what looked like new windows still in their packaging. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She felt Carol step up behind her. Lily, Vincent said, and his voice was gentle now. All 6'3" of him made gentle by the expression on his face. I want to introduce you to some people. He turned, he gestured, and from the crowd moving toward her porch came figures she recognized, Russell grinning his wide grin, a toolbox in each hand. Pat already in her work boots and tool belt, looking at the roofline with professional focus. Doug, his gray beard tucked into his jacket, raising one dinner plate hand in greeting. And behind them dozens more, hundreds more. They all came because of what you did, Vincent said. Every single one of them. Lily could not speak. You fed strangers, he said. You gave them a dry floor and a hot meal, and you looked at them like they were worth looking at. And people heard about that. He paused. People needed to hear about that. Carol touched her mother's arm, her daughter's hand familiar and warm. Mom, Carol said very quietly. Lily lowered her hand from her mouth. She looked at Vincent. She looked at all of them, all those people, all those bikes, all that lumber and equipment and purposeful human energy, organized around the project of her house, her life, the roof over her head that she had been keeping held together with a bucket and stubbornness for 2 years. She made herself stand straight. Coffee's on, she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. And I'm going to need someone to tell me how many people I'm feeding today because I need to go to the store. Russell burst out laughing. And then somehow everyone was laughing, that ripple of laughter moving through the crowd the way wind moves through a field, and Lily stood on her repaired porch in the gray Saturday morning and felt the laughter wash over her, and she let it. She let it happen. Then she went inside to count her eggs. The store run took 40 minutes and cost more than Lily had spent on groceries in a single trip in years. She didn't do it alone. Russell drove her his big pickup truck, and he pushed the cart while she pointed, and he didn't say a word about the total when it came up on the register, except to reach past her and hand the cashier his card before she could get to her purse. Don't, Lily said. Already done, Russell said. Russell, you can fight me about it later, he said. Right now, we've got about 240 people who haven't eaten breakfast, and I promise you that's a more urgent problem. She looked at him. He looked back at her completely unapologetic, and she recognized the expression she'd worn it herself many times when she'd done something for someone who didn't want her to, and she knew she was right anyway. Fine, she said, but I'm paying you back. Yes, ma'am, he said in the tone of a man who had no intention of letting that happen. By the time they got back, her house had become the center of something she didn't have a word for. The road was full. The yard was full. The controlled, purposeful energy she'd seen at 5:58 in the morning had organized itself into something that worked like a machine. Multiple crews moving in different directions, each with a clear task. Nobody colliding, nobody standing around. Pat had the roof crew moving. Doug had a foundation team working the east wall with equipment she didn't recognize. A man whose name she later learned was Carter was coordinating the window installation, and he had a clipboard and a voice that carried clean across a crowd, and he was using both. Sam was in the middle of all of it. Carol saw him first and made a sound that was half alarm and half exasperation. Samuel. She was moving toward him before she finished his name. He was standing next to 2 men with an enormous circular saw, watching them cut lumber with the focused attention of a person witnessing something that they intend to do themselves one day. Mom, I'm watching, Sam said. I'm not touching anything. One of the men with the saw looked up at Carol. He's been asking good questions, the man said. He can stay on this side of the line and watch if it's okay with you. Carol looked at the man. She looked at her son. She did the calculation that parents do 100 times a day, the risk versus wonder calculation, and she came out somewhere in the middle. On that side of the line, she said, both feet. Both feet, Sam agreed, and turned back to the saw with the expression of someone who has just won a significant negotiation. Maya, who was 14 and considered herself above construction equipment, had found Pat. She was following Pat around the roof crew with her phone out asking questions, and Pat was answering them the way Pat did everything directly without talking down the same way she'd talk to any adult who asked her something real. Lily watched this from the kitchen window while she organized the food, and she felt something warm and complicated move through her chest watching her granddaughter learn something from a woman who built things with her hands. She fed people in shifts. There was no other way to do it. The kitchen table seated 6. The living room could hold another 12 if people were willing to eat standing, which they were. And she ran 2 pots of scrambled eggs and 3 dozen biscuits through before 9 in the morning. People came in, ate, said thank you, went back out. Nobody helped themselves to anything they hadn't been offered. Nobody went into rooms they hadn't been invited into. Her house full of strangers for the second time in 2 weeks held its particular careful quiet indoors, even as the outside of it roared with activity. Around 9:15, a man came to the kitchen door she hadn't seen before. Older 70 maybe, with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard and a Hell's Angels patch on his chest like all the others, but something different in his bearing, some extra weight of authority or age or both. He knocked on the door frame, even though the door was open. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "my name is Harold. I don't want to interrupt your cooking." "You're not interrupting," she said. "You want eggs?" "I had some, thank you." He came into the kitchen slowly with the careful movement of a man whose knees had given him decades of trouble. He sat down at the table without being invited, which she noticed. But he sat down the way older people sit, like the decision to stand had become increasingly optional. "Vincent asked me to come today," Harold said. "Are you his—" She searched for the word. "I've been around a long time," Harold said, which was not exactly an answer, but was its own kind of answer. "I wanted to talk to you about something, if you'll let me." She turned from the stove. She looked at him. "Go ahead." "The house," he said. "What's being done outside today, that's 1 day of work. Pat's going to need to come back. Doug's foundation work is going to need follow-up. The windows being installed today are good windows donated by a supply company in Phoenix that owes Vincent a professional courtesy." He paused. "What I want to talk about is the long term." Lily sat down across from him. She folded her hands on the table. She gave him her full attention. "You're 75, Harold said. "You're alone. This house it was a good house. It can be a good house again, but it needs more than one Saturday." "I'm aware of that," she said. "There's a nonprofit," Harold said, "out of Phoenix. They work specifically with elderly homeowners on fixed incomes. Structural repairs, weatherproofing, electrical plumbing. They have a volunteer network and they have relationships with suppliers. They can put a maintenance schedule on this house that means it gets looked at twice a year, not once a decade." Lily was quiet. "I sit on their board," Harold said simply. "I'd like to refer your case to them, with your permission." The kitchen was still. From outside came the rhythmic knock of a nail gun and someone calling instructions, and the general organized noise of hundreds of people doing useful things. From inside, there was just Harold's calm face and the coffee maker and the questions sitting on the table between them. "Why do you sit on their board?" Lily said. That's not the obvious thing. For someone in your—" She gestured a small gesture that meant all of it. The patch, the jacket, the history she could only imagine. Harold smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that has seen enough of the world to be gentle with it. "I'm 71 years old," he said. "I've been writing since I was 19. I've done a lot of things in my life I'm not proud of, and some I am." He looked at his hands on the table. "My wife died 8 years ago. We had a house in Scottsdale. After she was gone, I couldn't be in that house, so I sold it. And I thought about all the people who can't just sell it, who don't have that option, who are just stuck, holding on." He looked up. "I had money I didn't need. I knew people who knew how to build things. It seemed like the obvious next step." Lily looked at this man for a long moment. "How many people has it helped?" she said. 47 houses, he said. Then he smiled slightly, and she heard the number. 47, the same as the bikers. "That was not intentional," he said. "I just counted recently. But I noticed it too." She felt something shift inside her. Not a dramatic shift, not a breaking open shift, just a small, quiet realignment, the way a compass finally settles on north after being near a magnet. "Yes," she said, "refer my case." Harold nodded. He reached into his jacket and produced a card, a real business card, the kind with an organization name and a logo, and set it on the table beside the ceramic rooster. "Someone will call you Monday," he said. "A woman named Teresa. She's the program director. She's very organized and slightly terrifying." "I like terrifying," Lily said. Harold stood up slowly, his knees announcing their opinion. "One more thing," he said. She waited. Vincent told me how this started, Harold said, about the storm, the 47 people, the spaghetti. He looked at her steadily. I want you to know that that story has gone, it has traveled, Mrs. Thompson. Further than you know, further than Williams, Arizona. He paused. People needed that story. People needed to hear about a woman who opened her door because someone knocked politely and said, please. You'd be surprised how rare that is, how much it means when somebody does it. She was quiet. You didn't just feed people dinner, Harold said. You reminded people what they were. And that's not a small thing. That's not a spaghetti thing. That's something else entirely. He left before she could answer. She sat at the table with her hands flat on the surface, and she stared at the ceramic rooster, and she breathed through her nose, in and out, the way her doctor had told her, the way you do, when your heart is doing something fast and you need it to stop. Outside, the nail gun knocked. Someone laughed. Sam asked a question about circular saws in a voice she could hear even through the window. She got up and went back to the stove. By noon, the back roof was stripped. She didn't go out and look at it directly. She could hear it, the sounds of decking, coming off the calls between Pat and her crew, the controlled demolition of the part of her house she'd been protecting with a bucket for 2 years. There was something visceral about the sound, something that felt like watching a wound get properly cleaned for the first time, necessary and sharp and right. Carol found her at noon standing at the kitchen window with a dish towel in her hands, not washing anything, just standing. You okay? Carol said. Yes, Lily said. Mom, you're standing in the kitchen not doing anything. That doesn't happen. Lily set the dish towel down. I'm listening, she said. Carol stood beside her and they both looked out the window at the activity in the yard, at the various crews moving with their purposeful energy, at Sam, who had migrated from the lumber crew to the window installation team and was now being shown how to use a level by a patient man with a gray ponytail. He's going to try to become a contractor, Carol said. There are worse things to be, Lily said. A silence. I've been thinking about something, Carol said. She was choosing her words carefully. Lily could feel the carefulness the way you feel someone's hand on your arm before they say the hard thing. I want to talk to you about the house. I'm listening, Lily said again. Not just the repairs. Carol turned to look at her. After, when everything's fixed. I want to talk about whether you want to keep living out here alone. There it was, the thing Lily had known was coming, the thing she'd been pre-defending against since Carol said she was driving out. She felt herself stiffen slightly, her spine going straight and certain the way it did when something she cared about was being approached too directly. I'm not leaving my house, she said. I'm not asking you to leave it, Carol said quickly. I'm asking him if this is what you want, actually want, not what you're holding on to because you held on to it through the hard years. Those are different things, Mom. Lily was quiet. Because I talked to Doug this morning, Carol continued, about the foundation. And he was very gentle about it. But Mom, it's not just the water damage. The whole east side is shifting. Very slowly, but it's shifting. Pat said the roof decking is worse than she originally estimated. The panel. I know about the panel, Lily said. Russell said it's a miracle it hasn't. Carol. Her voice was quiet, but it stopped Carol mid-sentence. I know what the house is. I know every single thing that's wrong with it. I have known for years. She paused. I choose to be here. I choose this house. Not because I'm stubborn, although I am stubborn, but because this is where Gerald and I built our life. This is where I know the sound of every wind and every creek. This is where my vegetable garden is, and where my grandchildren visit, and where I know myself. Do you understand that? Carol's eyes were bright. Yes, she said. I understand that. Good, Lily said, because I'm not leaving, but I will let them fix it, and I will let Harold's people check on it, and I will call Vincent when things go wrong instead of putting a bucket down and considering the matter handled. She looked at her daughter. That's what I can offer you. That's my compromise. Carol was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took her mother's hand, and she held it the way you hold something you almost lost, careful and certain and with full attention. Okay, she said. Okay, Mom. They stood at the window together, holding hands, watching the controlled, beautiful chaos happening to the house outside. At 2 p.m, something happened that Lily did not expect and was not prepared for. It started with a A news van from the Flagstaff affiliate turned slowly onto a road and stopped at the edge of the crowd of motorcycles. A young woman got out with a camera operator behind her, and she looked around at what was happening with an expression that was equal parts professional assessment and naked human amazement. Vincent appeared at Lily's kitchen door at 2:07. "There's press at the end of the road," he said. "I can see that," Lily said. "I can send someone to ask them to leave." "Do they have a right to be there?" "It's a public road, Stein." "Then don't send anyone," she said. "They're not hurting anything." Vincent studied her. "You sure? Because if this gets on the news..." "If this gets on the news," Lily said, "Uskande, maybe it does what Harold said. Maybe it travels further." She looked at him. "Maybe somebody else opens their door to someone who knocked politely. Maybe somebody else lets themselves be helped when they need it." She shrugged a small, deliberate shrug. "I can think of worse things to be on the news for." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly, the way people shake their heads when they've been surprised by something and they're not trying to hide it. "You know what I keep thinking," he said. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you just not answered the door that night." "I answered it," Lily said. "But what if you hadn't?" She thought about it honestly. She thought about 47 men in the rain with nowhere to go. She thought about Harold and his 47 houses. She thought about the bucket in the back bedroom, which was not in the back bedroom anymore, which was outside on the lawn where Doug had found it, and set it aside with the quiet efficiency of a man removing evidence of something that should never have been allowed to happen. "I've never been good at not answering," she said. "It's a character flaw." "No," Vincent said, "it's not." At 4:15, Pat came down from the roof. She came into the kitchen with dust on her jacket and plaster on her boots and the particular look of a woman who has been up high doing hard work and is satisfied with what she found when she got there. She sat down at the kitchen table and she accepted the glass of water Lily gave her, and she drank half of it before she said anything. "New decking is going up," she said. "Full back, half of the house. Should be done before dark weather holding. I want to come back next weekend for the final layer and the inspection." "I'll have coffee on," Lily said. "Good coffee," Pat said. "The good kind. Always now." Pat looked at her, a straight, level, woman-to-woman look. "You doing all right with all of this?" "I'm doing fine," Lily said. "Because it's a lot," Pat said. "It's a lot of people and a lot of things happening to your house all at once, and I just want to make sure." Patty and Lily said, "In 40 years of marriage, Gerald used to say I was the calmest person he had ever met in a crisis." "Yeah." "And then he'd say, 'Lily, I think you might be broken in a very useful way.'" She smiled, the real smile, the one that showed her teeth, the one that took 20 years off her. "I never argued with him about it." Pat laughed, a real full laugh. "I like him," she said, "from everything you say." "He would have liked you," Lily said. "He always said the most interesting people he'd ever met were the ones who were good at something with their hands." She looked at Pat. He was right about that too. The afternoon moved fast in the way that days move when they're full of real things. The window crew finished the front rooms by 3 and moved to the back. Doug's team poured a quickset compound into the foundation crack and braced the east wall framing with new lumber that Lily could smell from the kitchen, that clean raw wood smell that reminded her of every good thing that had ever been built. Russell finished the electrical panel, replaced it entirely, brought it up to code, installed a new circuit breaker that he labeled in his careful handwriting. Each circuit labeled exactly the kind of care that has said, "I know somebody else is going to have to understand this after me." He brought Lily to the utility room before he left and showed her the new panel. "Every circuit is labeled," he said. "This one is the kitchen. This is the back bedrooms. This is the porch. If anything trips you, reset it here." He pointed to the main breaker. "And if anything feels wrong, smells wrong, if the lights flicker or you smell burning..." "I call you," Lily said. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said, "you call me." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a card, just his name and his number handwritten like Vincent's. "Anytime," he said, "day or night, you call." She took the card. She added it to the drawer next to Vincent's, next to Harold's nonprofit card. The drawer that had started as the place for insurance papers and Gerald's will was becoming something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet, but that felt important. She called it privately the drawer of people who would answer. At 6:30, as the light went golden and low, Vincent gathered everyone in the yard. Lily stood on her porch with Carol on one side and Sam on the other. Sam, who had accumulated sawdust in his hair, in a deep personal relationship with the man with the gray ponytail, and a plan, apparently, to become a licensed contractor by the time he was 16. She looked out at all of them, all those people who had come because of a knock on a door and a pot of spaghetti and a yes. Vincent turned to look at her from the middle of the crowd. "We'll be back next weekend," he said. "Pat's got the roof to finish. Doug wants to check the foundation settlement. There's some interior work on the back bedroom we didn't get to." "I'll have food," Lily said. "Lily," he said, "you don't have to." "I know," she said. "I want to." The crowd was looking at her, all those faces turned toward her waiting. She felt the weight of it, not a heavy weight, but a real one, the kind that means something is being asked of you that you actually have the capacity to give. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was clear, and she kept it that way deliberately. "I don't have words for this. I've been trying to find them all day, and I don't have them." She paused. "Gerald used to say that actions were just words your body says when your mouth can't do it. I think what happened today said something I couldn't have said in a year of trying." The yard was completely quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold. "You made this house livable again," she said. "But that's not the thing. The thing is," she stopped. She pressed her hand to her chest for a second. "The thing is, I thought I was alone. I thought this was just me holding this together by myself because that's what there was. And today," she stopped again. "Today I found out that's not what there was. Today I found out there was this the whole time and I just didn't know to ask." Nobody moved. "So," she said, "thank you for coming, for the roof and the windows and the panel and the railing and all of it. But mostly," her voice went rough at the edge, and she let it be rough. She was done being smooth about things. "Mostly thank you for showing up." The silence held for one more beat. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. And then all of them, about 200 and however many of them, standing in her yard in the golden late afternoon light clapping. Not a polite clapping, not the kind you give at the end of a speech, the real kind, the kind that has feeling behind it. Carol put her arm around Lily's shoulders. Sam pressed his dusty head against her arm. Lily stood on her repaired porch in front of her repaired house, and she let herself be seen. She didn't look away. She didn't deflect or diminish or make a joke. She just stood there straight and present, and she let it land, all of it, the clapping and the faces and the golden light and the new wood smell of everything that had been fixed. She let it land, and she felt it. And for the first time in 10 years, standing on that porch, she did not feel alone. The news van footage aired Sunday morning. Lily didn't watch it herself. She didn't find out until Carol called from the kitchen where she'd been making coffee and said, "Mom, come here." Her voice had the texture of someone who has just seen something they weren't prepared for, and Lily came and Carol turned the small kitchen television toward her, and there it was. Her house, her yard, her porch. The reporter standing at the edge of the road with 200 motorcycles behind her saying into the camera that what had started as a storm and a pot of spaghetti had become something that the town of Williams, Arizona was still trying to find words for. They had interviewed Vincent. He stood straight, his hands at his sides, and he said 4 sentences. He said a woman named Lily Thompson had opened her door to strangers because they needed help. He said that was the whole story. He said the rest of it, the roof, the windows, the 200 people, was just what happens when somebody does the right thing and other people find out about it. He said he didn't think it was remarkable. He said he thought it should be ordinary. Then the camera cut back to the reporter, and the reporter said that the video of 200 motorcycles parked outside a 75-year-old widow's house had been posted on social media by someone in the crowd and had, in the 12 hours since Saturday evening, been viewed 4.7 million times. Lily sat down at the kitchen table. 4.7 million, she said. "And that was last night," Carol said. "It's probably more by now." Lily looked at the ceramic rooster. The ceramic rooster looked back at her, uninformative as always. "Gerald," she said to nobody in particular, "you would not believe this." Her phone started ringing at 8:45. She didn't recognize the number Arizona area code, but not a number she knew, and she let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Different number. Then again. She stood in her kitchen and watched her phone ring 3 times in 4 minutes, and she felt something between amusement and alarm, a feeling she was starting to associate specifically with the events of the past 2 weeks. Carol picked up the fourth call. "This is Carol Thompson speaking," she said in her daughter-of-a-lawyer voice that she'd inherited from absolutely nobody, but had developed entirely on her own. She listened for a moment. "I see. Can you hold one moment?" She covered the phone with her hand. "It's a producer from a morning show, national." Lily looked at her. "They want to fly you to New York," Carol said. "No," Lily said. "Mom, no," she said again calmly and completely. "I'm not going on television. I fed people dinner. I am not going on television about feeding people dinner." Carol relayed this. The producer apparently had a response. Carol listened, her expression going from professional to something more complicated. "She says they want to make a donation to whatever cause you'd like for coming on." She paused. "She's saying a significant donation." Lily thought about Harold's nonprofit, the 47 houses, Teresa, the terrifying program director who was apparently going to call on Monday. She thought about all the people who were like her right now, somewhere with a bucket into the back bedroom and a crack in the east wall, and too much pride and too little help. "Tell her no to the interview," Lily said. "Tell her yes to the donation if she means it, and tell her the name of the organization." Carol raised an eyebrow. That's actually very smart, Mom." "I know," Lily said. "Tell her." Carol told her. The producer apparently meant it. She took the organization name and she said someone would be in touch, and Carol hung up. And they looked at each other and Lily said, "Is there more coffee?" And Carol laughed helplessly, the way she'd been laughing since she arrived, the kind of laughing that happens when events are moving faster than your ability to react to them appropriately. The next call was a woman named Diane from the Phoenix Gazette who wanted to write a longer piece. Lily said yes to that one because she thought a newspaper article was different from television, because she thought the written word was steadier, more real, less given to distortion. She liked Diane's voice. It was direct and curious without being intrusive. And when Diane asked her questions, she asked real ones, not the soft, obvious ones Lily had been bracing for. "What do you think made the difference?" Diane asked. "That night, what made you open the door?" Lily thought about it. She thought about Gerald, about his county fair ceramic rooster, about 47 men in her yard in the rain. She thought about what she'd said to Vincent in the hallway that first night, that the only way to know what somebody's made of is to watch what they do when they need something and they know you could say no. "I think fear is a reasonable thing," Lily said. "Fear makes sense. I'm not criticizing anybody who would have stayed inside with the lights off and waited for them to go." She paused. "But I've been afraid before. I've been afraid plenty. And I've learned that fear is a feeling, not a fact. It tells you something's present, but it doesn't tell you what it is." She paused again. "They knocked politely. I saw men who needed help. Everything else was just the jacket." Diane was quiet on the other end for a moment. "Can I print that?" she said. "That's why I said it," Lily said. Teresa called Monday at 9 sharp. She was, as Harold had promised, slightly terrifying, efficient, and warm simultaneously, the combination of a person who cares very much and has learned to channel that caring into effective action rather than feeling. She had already pulled the reports from Pat and Doug and Russell. She had a maintenance schedule in mind. She had contractors in the Williams area who were part of the volunteer network. She wanted to send someone for an intake assessment on Wednesday. "Wednesday is fine," Lily said. "There's no cost to you," Teresa said. "I want to be clear about that." "Harold told me. And I want to be clear that this isn't charity," Teresa said, and Lily heard something deliberate in it, something that said this woman had had this conversation before and understood exactly what it meant to the people she was having it with. "This is a program that exists because people built it. People who had skills and time and the belief that a person's home shouldn't fall apart around them just because they can't afford to stop it alone. You're not receiving something you didn't earn. You're receiving something that was built for you." Lily was quiet for a moment. "You're good at this," she said. "I've been doing it for 8 years, Teresa said. "And every single time, the person I call says almost word for word, 'I don't want to be a burden.' And every time I say the same thing back." She paused. "Do you want to know what I say?" "Tell me," Lily said. I say the burden isn't asking for help. The burden is everyone who loves you watching you not ask and not being able to do anything about it. The kitchen was absolutely still. Harold's mother, Lily said. Yes, Teresa said quietly. That's where it started. Lily closed her eyes for a second. She thought about Gerald. She thought about what he would have done if their situations had been reversed, if she had been the one who died first, if he had been the one left in this house with a leaking roof and a cracked foundation and a pride that didn't know how to bend. She knew what he would have done. He would have done exactly what she had done. He would have emptied the bucket and called it a system and never told Carol and slowly, stubbornly, lovingly held the thing together by himself until he couldn't. Wednesday, Lily said. 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, Teresa confirmed. I'll see you then. She hung up and sat with it. She sat with the strange, unfamiliar, somewhat dizzying feeling of being taken care of having people, multiple people, a network of people, people with clipboards and tool belts and maintenance schedules looking out for her house, which was her life, which was the place where Gerald still lived in every creek and corner. She picked up the phone and she called Vincent. He answered on the first ring. Lily. Teresa called, she said, Wednesday. Good, he said. She's excellent. You knew Harold would come Saturday, she said. You asked him to come specifically. A pause. Yes. You planned that. I thought it might help. Vincent, she said, you didn't just come back to fix a roof. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said, I didn't. What did you come back to do? He took his time answering, and she let him take it because she'd learned that about him, that he was a man who needed a moment to find the real words, who didn't give you the first answer that came up, but the one underneath it. I came back, he said, because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Something about what a person owes another person just by virtue of both of them being on the same road at the same time. He stopped. My mother died alone because nobody showed up. You showed up for 47 strangers in the rain, and I thought the least I could do was make sure you didn't end up alone the same way she did. A pause. I thought the least 200 people could do was the same. She pressed her lips together. Your mother would have liked that, she said. Yeah, he said. His voice was rough at the edges. I think she would have. They talked for a while longer, practically about the follow-up work Pat was coming back for on Saturday, about a plumber Doug had recommended for the slow drain in the hall bathroom that Lily had been pretending wasn't a problem. Then they said goodbye, and she hung up, and she sat for a moment in the quiet kitchen with the sun coming through the window, and the ceramic rooster on the counter, and Gerald's chair across the table, and everything both exactly the same as it had always been and completely different. The Gazette article ran on Thursday. Diane had done what she'd promised. She'd written it straight, without sentimentality, without making Lily into something she wasn't. She was just a 75-year-old woman who had opened her door. The story was just what it was: a storm, a knock, a pot of spaghetti, and what happens when one decent act gets seen by enough people. Diane had quoted Vincent's 4 sentences from the news footage. She had quoted Harold. She had quoted Russell, who said with the directness Lily had come to expect from him, she didn't look at us and see a threat. She looked at us and saw people who were cold and wet and hungry. That's rarer than it should be. She had also quoted Lily. She had put the fear is a feeling, not a fact quote at the top of the piece, right under the headline in a pull quote box. Lily read the article at the kitchen table with her good coffee, and she read it twice, and she folded it and put it in the drawer. Next to Vincent's card, next to Harold's organization card, next to Russell's number. The drawer of people who would answer, which was also now the drawer of evidence that the past 2 weeks had actually happened and weren't something she'd invented during a long, strange dream. Sam called to her Thursday evening. He had read the article online. Carol had sent him the link, and he had opinions. Grandma, he said, you're famous. I'm not famous, she said, and you're in the paper. Lots of people are in the paper. You have 4.7 million views. I had nothing to do with the views, she said. Someone else took the video. Grandma, he was 11 and therefore occasionally exhausting. Just say you're famous. I'm not famous, Sam. I'm a woman who made dinner. A pause. A really good dinner, though, he said. Can you make the spaghetti when we come back? She smiled. The real smile, the one with teeth. I'll make the spaghetti, she said. With the bread. With the bread. Okay, he said. Satisfied the way 11-year-olds are satisfied when they've secured something concrete from an abstract situation. Okay, I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you know. Pat finished the roof the following Saturday. She came with two of her crew and they were done by early afternoon. And when she came down and walked Lily through what had been done, the new decking, the new shingles, the resealed flashing, the reinforced ridge line, she used her hands to describe it the way people do when they know something in their body, not just their head. It'll outlast both of us, Pat said. Don't say that, Lily said. You're 50 years younger than me. I'm 44, Pat said. My point stands. Pat laughed. She looked up at the house the way she always looked at houses, that reflexive professional assessment, the measuring eye, and something in her face went quiet and satisfied in the way a craftsman's face goes when a thing has been done right. It's a good house, she said. Under everything, it's a really solid house. Gerald built it, Lily said. He and his brother, summer of 1974. Pat looked at her. He built it himself. Most of it, his brother did the electrical, which is probably why the panel needed replacing 50 years later. Pat laughed again and shook her head. Well, she said, he built the bones right. The bones are good. She looked at Lily. You take care of the bones, the rest is just maintenance. That sounds like something he would have said in. Lily said, smart man. The smartest I ever knew, boy, Lily said. And I've met a few good ones lately, so that's saying something. The weeks after that moved differently than weeks had moved before. Not dramatically, nothing announced itself. Nothing arrived in a rush. But differently, the way a room feels different when a window that's been painted shut finally gets open. Teresa's intake person came Wednesday and walked the property and took photographs and produced a maintenance schedule that was so thorough it covered seasonal checks Lily had never thought to do, had never known to do. The plumber Doug recommended came the following week for the hall bathroom drain and found while he was there a slow leak behind the kitchen wall that had been there long enough to be soft, but not long enough to be catastrophic. And he fixed it with the particular satisfaction of someone who has caught something before it became a disaster. Russell texted once a week. Just a check-in. Nothing elaborate, a single line, how's the panel holding up, or how'd the weather treat you this week? She texted back because her granddaughter had spent an hour teaching her how, and she was not going to let that hour go to waste. Her texts were short and slightly formal, and Russell seemed to find them charming, which she found mildly irritating and privately enjoyed. Vincent came by once about 3 weeks after the big Saturday. He didn't call first, just pulled up in the late afternoon and knocked on the porch door, which was what he always did. Now knocked on the porch door rather than the front door, because the porch was where she spent her afternoons, and he knew that. She was in the garden. She heard the knock and called from around the side of the house, and he came to find her picking his way carefully around the tomato cages, the way large men pick their way through small gardens with the exaggerated care of someone who is very aware of the damage they could do. She handed him a tomato without comment. He bit into it and made the face people make when something is better than they expected. Gerald's variety, she said. He started them from seeds every February. I kept the seeds. You keep everything, Vincent said. It wasn't a criticism. It was an observation made with something like respect. Some things deserve to be kept, she said. They stood in the garden in the afternoon warmth, and she deadheaded a few spent blossoms, and he just stood there, which she'd noticed was something he was capable of just standing, not needing to fill the silence, comfortable in his own size and presence in a way that took a certain kind of person. How are you, he said. Good, she said, and she meant it again the same way she'd meant it with Carol. Actually good. Teresa, treating you well. She's terrifying and wonderful, Lily said. As advertised. He smiled, the full smile, the one that changed his face. She is that. She kept deadheading for a moment. How are you, she said. He was quiet, she waited. I've been thinking about my mother more, he said. Since all this. He paused. I don't know if that's a bad thing or good thing. It feels like both. It's both, she said. That's what grief is. It's not one thing, it's always both things. The missing and the gratitude sitting right next to each other. He nodded slowly. You did something good, she said. What you organized, what you brought here. That doesn't undo what happened to her, but it isn't supposed to. She looked at him. It's supposed to be what it is, which is a man who loved his mother deciding that love doesn't stop because she's gone. It just redirects. Vincent was very still. She'd be proud of you, Lily said, simply, directly. I want you to know that I believe that. He looked away. He looked at the garden fence, the horizon somewhere that wasn't her face, and he was still for a long moment. His jaw worked the way it did when he was feeling something he hadn't organized words for yet. Thank you, he said. His voice was rough and low. That means thank you. She handed him another tomato. He took it. They stood there in the warm afternoon in a comfortable, full silence, eating tomatoes from the garden that Gerald had started, and Lily felt the truth of her life settle around her, the way the house had settled after the new decking went on solidly, finally the way things feel when they've been fixed right. The morning news segment ran 6 weeks after the big Saturday. Not the one Lily had refused, not New York, not a studio with stage lights, and a host who had never been to Williams, Arizona, and never would. A local piece produced by the Flagstaff affiliate that had sent the van, and they had done it right. They had come to the house, her house, and they had filmed the new roof and the solid porch railing and the garden and the kitchen with the ceramic rooster, and they had let Lily sit at her own table and speak in her own voice without asking her to simplify or dramatize or make it something it wasn't. They asked her what she'd want people to take from the story. She thought about it. She thought about everything, the storm, the knock, the spaghetti, the night in the kitchen with Russell, talking about his father Vincent's face when she told him she saw the man, and not just the jacket, Carol's hand holding hers at the porch window, Sam's sawdust hair pressed against her arm, Pat saying the bones are good, the drawer full of cards from people who would answer. I'd want them to answer the door, she said, whatever door it is. When somebody knocks, really knocks, the way people knock when they don't know if they're welcome, answer it. She paused. Fear makes sense. I understand fear. But every person I have ever loved, every good thing that has ever come into my life came in through a door I opened when I wasn't sure I should. She let that sit for a moment. And the other thing, she said, let people help you. That's the harder one for most of us. Opening the door to someone who needs you is one kind of courage. Letting someone open a door for you, letting yourself need something and not pretending you don't, that's a different kind. And it's just as important. She looked at the camera. That one took me 75 years to learn. I'm telling you now, so maybe it takes you less. The segment aired on a Tuesday morning, and by noon the clip had been shared 90,000 times. And by evening, a woman in Georgia had posted that she had opened her door to a neighbor she'd been avoiding for 3 years, and a man in Oregon had posted that he had finally let his kids come, help him with his house that he'd been insisting for 2 years was fine. And a woman in Minnesota had posted that she had called her mother and asked how she was really doing. Not the phone, okay, but the real okay. And her mother had cried, and she had cried, and they had talked for 2 hours about things they had never said. Lily didn't see most of these. Carol read them to her over the phone, and Lily listened and said occasionally, good, or that's the one, or simply yes. She was in the kitchen when Carol called. She was making dinner. She had the radio on low and the tomatoes from the garden on the counter, and Gerald's big canning pot on the back burner, and the good coffee going in the maker. And outside her kitchen window, the late sun came down on a house with a solid roof and a sound foundation, and windows that didn't shake, and electrical circuits that were labeled in careful handwriting by a man who wanted to make sure the next person could understand it. She was making spaghetti. She made it the same way she always had, the same sauce, the same oregano and garlic powder, the same low, slow simmer that needed patience, the same tasting and adjusting, making something good out of what was there. She stirred the pot, and she listened to Carol's voice on the phone reading her the things people were saying, and she looked at the ceramic rooster on the counter, though, one Gerald had won at the county fair 31 years ago, and she said to it quietly, just in her own kitchen, to the ceramic face that had watched her through 10 years of alone. You see that? You see what one door can do. The rooster didn't answer, but the kitchen was warm and the sauce smelled right, and somewhere down the highway, the world was doing what Lily Thompson had spent 75 years believing it could do, given the smallest invitation, given one door opened by one person in one storm, given the simplest, most ordinary, most radical act, there is choosing to see another person clearly and asking them to come in. She turned up the heat and let the sauce come to a full rolling boil. Some things she had always believed were worth cooking until they were done right. She had never been more certain of anything in her life.